Jason had never been the type to impulse buy, but the animal auction had him feeling something he couldn't quite explain. At 26, life had felt like it was stuck in neutral for him. He was still renting a small apartment, working long hours at a desk job he wasn't passionate about, and trying to navigate the complexities of adulthood. It was routine, predictable, and while he had always loved animals, his life was far too chaotic to think about adopting a pet. But there he was, standing in the corner of a dusty warehouse, the auctioneer's voice booming through the air, surrounded by cages filled with animals that had been abandoned, rejected, or surrendered for one reason or another. Most of the dogs were healthy, full of energy, and eager for a second chance at life. But one particular dog stood out from the rest. In the back of the room, in a worn-out cage, sat a scruffy mutt with a thin coat of matted fur and sad, almost defeated eyes. The dog didn't jump up to greet the crowd, didn't wag its tail like the others. It just sat there, still as a stone, watching the auctioneer with a resigned expression, as though it knew it would be passed over again. Jason found himself staring at the dog for what felt like an eternity. There was something about the dog's gaze, something that tugged at his heartstrings. It wasn't just the sadness in its eyes, but the deep sense of abandonment. This was a dog that had been through something terrible. Maybe it had been abandoned by its previous owners. Maybe it had been abused or neglected. But Jason felt an overwhelming urge to do something. The bidding began, and as the auctioneer called out the opening price, Jason's mind raced. He had no plans to adopt a dog, certainly not one like this. Old, unkempt, and clearly troubled. The crowd around him seemed uninterested, murmuring among them. Jason's small apartment was quiet, almost eerily so, as he stood by the door holding the leash of the dog he had impulsively bought. He hadn't thought this far ahead. What was he supposed to do now? The dog, who he had named Charlie, sat at the threshold, staring at him with wide, apprehensive eyes, as if it could sense Jason's uncertainty. There were no wagging tails or excited jumps, just a nervous energy that filled the room. Charlie had been a last-minute decision, an impulse that had been driven by an overwhelming urge to rescue the dog. But now, standing in the dim light of his apartment, Jason questioned if he was truly ready for what he had just brought into his life. He'd read about rescue dogs, their struggles, and the patience it took to earn their trust. But reading about it and living it were two very different things. Jason crouched down, offering Charlie a treat from the small bag he had purchased at the pet store. The dog eyed it, sniffed it tentatively, and then turned his head away, still unsure. Jason's heart sank. Was Charlie too far gone? Could he ever be the happy, playful dog he hoped for? The first night with Charlie was a challenge. The dog didn't sleep. He paced anxiously around the apartment, his nails clicking on the hardwood floors, his eyes constantly darting around as if waiting for something bad to happen. Jason tried to comfort him, but every time he reached out, Charlie flinched and backed away. Jason was frustrated. He had always believed in the power of second chances, but right now, Charlie seemed like a broken puzzle, one that couldn't be pieced together. The following days weren't any easier. Charlie refused to eat unless Jason wasn't looking, and even then, it was only a few hesitant bites. He was terrified of sudden movements or loud sounds. Jason would turn on the TV, and Charlie would jump up, his ears flat against his head, looking like he might bolt at any moment. Jason's work schedule made it difficult to spend as much time with Charlie as he needed, and the dog's fearfulness only deepened when Jason would leave for the day. Jason would come home to find Charlie hiding under the kitchen table, shaking. It was heartbreaking. He had wanted to help, to show this dog that he was safe, but everything seemed to be backfiring. It wasn't just Charlie who was struggling. Jason felt it too. The loneliness that had once seemed like a distant shadow was now in full force. He had taken on a responsibility he wasn't sure he was prepared for, and his apartment, which had once been a space of solitude, now felt suffocating. But one thing kept Jason going, the faint glimmer of hope he saw in Charlie's eyes. Despite his fear, despite the trauma that seemed to haunt him. There was a softness in those eyes, a longing for connection that Jason couldn't ignore. Charlie hadn't given up completely. And neither would Jason. As the days passed, Jason realized that this wasn't going to be easy, but something in him refused to quit. Slowly, he began to understand that earning Charlie's trust would take time, and that perhaps the journey wasn't just about saving the dog. It was about learning patience, compassion, and how to love something, even when it seemed unlovable. Jason whispered softly to Charlie one night, as the dog curled up on the couch beside him. "We'll figure this out, buddy. I promise." Weeks passed, and the struggle to connect with Charlie began to feel less like a challenge and more like a quiet, ongoing battle. Jason had accepted the fact that there were no quick fixes when it came to trust. The dog's wounds, emotional and perhaps physical, ran deep. Every time Jason tried to approach Charlie too quickly, the dog would cower, his eyes wide with fear. But Jason refused to give up. He knew it wasn't just about training a dog. It was about healing a broken spirit. At first, it felt as though every day was a repetition of the last. Jason would come home from work to find Charlie curled up under the table, his body stiff with anxiety, eyes darting as if anticipating something awful. The apartment felt like a space where silence reigned, broken only by the sound of Charlie's pacing or the occasional whimper. Jason tried everything he could think of: gentle words, treats, calm, and slow movements, but nothing seemed to work. It was on a particularly quiet evening that things began to shift. Jason had been sitting on the couch, scrolling through his phone, when he heard a soft rustling sound. Glancing over, he saw Charlie, not cowering in the corner as usual, but slowly creeping toward him. His body language was tentative, but there was something new in his posture, something that suggested curiosity. Jason held his breath, not wanting to make any sudden movements. He knew this could be a breakthrough or another false alarm. Charlie took another cautious step, then another. Jason placed the phone down carefully, his hand hovering just above the space on the couch next to him. He didn't want to startle Charlie. Slowly, the dog stopped a few feet away, then gingerly sat down. His eyes were still wary, but he didn't run away. Jason smiled softly, his heart swelling in his chest. He reached out, not to pet Charlie just yet, but to offer him a treat. Slowly, carefully, he extended his hand. Charlie looked at it, then back at Jason, his tail giving a tiny, uncertain wag. Jason's fingers trembled slightly, but he stayed still, waiting. Charlie sniffed the treat, then gingerly took it from Jason's hand. It was a small victory, but to Jason, it felt monumental. It wasn't the grand gesture of running up to him excitedly or jumping on him for affection, but it was a step, a real one. The dog was starting to trust him. For the next few days, Jason kept the same routine. He would sit on the couch, speaking softly to Charlie, giving him space, but always offering him a little bit of food, a gentle word, a calm presence. Over time, Charlie started to stay closer to Jason. He'd sit beside him on the couch, though never touching, and would occasionally nuzzle a hand that reached out to him. Jason learned to be patient, letting Charlie take the lead when it came to interactions. It was a breakthrough, and it wasn't just Charlie who had changed. It was Jason too. In those moments of quiet, when Charlie slowly began to let his guard down, Jason realized that healing was a two-way street. Both he and the dog were in this together. And though the path ahead might still be long and filled with setbacks, Jason knew that they had taken the first step. And that was enough. As the weeks turned into months, Jason began to see subtle but promising signs that Charlie was starting to heal. Their relationship was no longer just about surviving each day. It had become a journey of trust, of small victories that meant the world. But even with these breakthroughs, Jason knew there was still much work to be done. The dog wasn't fully comfortable yet, and there were moments when Charlie would retreat back into his shell, frightened by sudden noises or fast movements. But Jason had learned to be patient. He knew that some wounds, no matter how deeply buried, would take time to mend. One Saturday morning, Jason decided to take Charlie to the park, a small, quiet one near his apartment, where he often walked to clear his mind. Jason had been hesitant about the idea at first. He wasn't sure how Charlie would react to the open space, the sounds of other dogs, or the unfamiliar environment. But he had noticed that Charlie's progress had been slow but steady. The dog no longer cowered when Jason reached out for him. He was more relaxed, his tail would wag occasionally, and he no longer hid under the table the moment Jason left the room. The moment they stepped into the park, Jason kept Charlie on a short leash, his eyes scanning the area. He was ready for any signs of distress. Charlie, however, seemed intrigued. His nose twitched as he sniffed the air. His ears perked up at the sound of birds chirping. For the first time, Jason noticed a spark of curiosity in the dog's eyes, a flicker of the playful spirit that had been hidden beneath the layers of fear. They walked along the winding path, past families with children, joggers, and a few other dogs. Charlie was hesitant at first, sticking close to Jason's side. But when they rounded a corner and came across a golden retriever, Charlie froze. The other dog, a young and friendly animal, bounded over with enthusiasm, wagging its tail. Jason braced himself for Charlie to panic, to shy away as he usually did. But to Jason's surprise, Charlie did the opposite. Without warning, he stepped forward, his tail slowly beginning to wag as he sniffed the retriever's nose. The two dogs circled each other, cautiously at first, then with more confidence. Jason's heart skipped a beat. This was it, a moment of connection, not just between him and Charlie, but between Charlie and the world around him. The golden retriever's owner, a woman in her 30s, smiled at the sight. "It looks like they're becoming fast friends," she said, her voice warm. "It's incredible how dogs can heal each other, don't you think?" Jason nodded, a lump in his throat. "I never thought I'd see this day. I wasn't sure he'd ever be comfortable with other dogs." The woman's smile deepened. "Sometimes it just takes time. You're doing great." For the next half hour, Charlie played with the golden retriever, his movements growing more confident as he trotted alongside his new friend. Jason watched, both amazed and emotional. He had been so caught up in the idea of fixing Charlie, of saving him, that he hadn't realized how much Charlie was already saving himself. As they left the park, Charlie's steps were lighter, his eyes brighter, and his posture more relaxed. It was a turning point. Jason realized that he wasn't just adopting a dog. He was learning the art of patience, and in return, Charlie was showing him how to embrace the unpredictable beauty of life. That afternoon, Jason sat with Charlie on the couch, a sense of peace settling over him. The dog curled up beside him, his body warm against Jason's side. For the first time in a long while, Jason felt like they were truly, finally, on the same page. Charlie wasn't just a broken animal he had rescued. He was an unexpected hero, teaching Jason the value of second chances and the joy that could come from taking things one step at a time. Jason had always been a private person, preferring to keep his life off social media. He'd never been one for selfies or sharing intimate details of his daily routine with strangers. But as Charlie continued to make progress, something inside Jason shifted. There was a story unfolding before him, one of resilience, healing, and the power of second chances. It was a story that deserved to be told. One evening, after yet another peaceful walk in the park, Jason snapped a photo of Charlie sitting contentedly at his side. The dog's fur was fuller, his eyes brighter, and his posture less guarded. There was a quiet strength in the way he looked up at Jason, as if saying, "We're in this together." Jason captioned the photo with a simple, heartfelt message. "From abandoned and broken to this. Never underestimate the power of love and patience. #second chances." Jason hesitated before hitting post. It wasn't like him to share such personal moments with the world, but he couldn't ignore the feeling that this was bigger than just him and Charlie. This was a story of hope, one that might inspire others to give a second chance to the animals, maybe even to the people in their lives who needed it most. The next morning, Jason was stunned to find that the post had gone viral. His notifications exploded as people began liking, sharing, and commenting on the photo. What had started as a simple gesture, a way to document Charlie's transformation, had quickly turned into something far more meaningful. Comments poured in from all over the world. Strangers shared their own stories of rescuing dogs, cats, and other animals, many of which had been abandoned, abused, or simply forgotten. Some people thanked Jason for sharing his journey, while others asked for advice on how to help their own anxious pets. Some even offered support, telling him they had been following Charlie's story from the beginning and were amazed at how far he had come. Jason was overwhelmed. He never imagined that his small, quiet life with Charlie would spark such a powerful response. But as he read the comments, something became clear. This wasn't just about him and Charlie anymore. It was about an entire community of people who believed in second chances. The post had struck a chord with those who had faced their own battles, whether with animals, relationships, or personal struggles. In the days that followed, Jason found himself sharing more about Charlie's progress. Photos of him lounging in the sun, playing fetch at the park, or curled up on the couch with Jason, both of them relaxed and content. Each post was accompanied by stories of how Charlie's fear had slowly been replaced with trust, and how, together, they had learned what it meant to love and to heal. What Jason didn't expect, however, was the ripple effect that his story would have. People started reaching out not only to share their own experiences, but also to ask how they could adopt dogs like Charlie from shelters. Animal rescue organizations saw a surge in interest, with people volunteering and donating to help dogs that had once been considered unadoptable. Jason became a kind of quiet ambassador for second chances, not just for dogs, but for anyone who had been overlooked or dismissed. But it wasn't the fame that mattered to Jason. It was the realization that Charlie, the dog who had once been abandoned and forgotten, had touched the hearts of so many people. And that, more than anything, was a reminder that even the smallest acts of kindness could ripple out and change the world in unexpected ways. Jason had thought they were through the hardest part. Charlie's fear had slowly melted away, and their bond had deepened beyond anything he could have imagined. The posts on social media kept coming in, people celebrating the progress they had made together. And the messages of support from fellow dog lovers only strengthened Jason's resolve. But life, as it often does, had a way of throwing unexpected challenges in their path. It all started on a quiet Sunday morning in late spring. Jason had taken Charlie on his usual walk around the neighborhood when they came across a large, barking dog in the park. It wasn't the first time they'd encountered another dog, but this one was different. The dog was bigger, more aggressive, and more than anything, Charlie sensed it. As soon as they stepped onto the path, Charlie stiffened. His tail went rigid, and his eyes were wide with fear. Jason, used to his dog's anxiety, tried to keep his composure. He gently tugged at Charlie's leash, trying to guide him away, but Charlie froze. The other dog, a large Rottweiler, had been barking loudly at the sight of them, and was now pulling on its leash toward them. Jason's heart began to race. He could feel the tension in Charlie's body, his muscles tight with panic. He had come so far, but now Jason feared that this moment, this one confrontation, could undo everything. The last thing he wanted was for Charlie to regress, to be overwhelmed by fear and retreat back into the shell he'd been in when Jason first adopted him. Before Jason could react, the Rottweiler lunged, snapping at the air between them. Charlie, terrified, yelped and tried to pull away. In the blink of an eye, Jason's grip on the leash slipped, and Charlie bolted, running in the opposite direction as fast as he could. The leash now dangled loosely in Jason's hand, and panic surged through him. "Charlie!" Jason shouted, rushing after him. "Charlie, wait!" The dog's terrified eyes were locked on the distance, and he ran as if his life depended on it. Jason sprinted after him, shouting his name, his voice hoarse with desperation. His mind raced, imagining the worst. What if Charlie ran into traffic? What if he got lost again? For what felt like an eternity, Jason chased Charlie through the neighborhood, dodging parked cars and pedestrians. The sight of Charlie's panicked form was like a knife to his heart. They had come so far, and now, all of it seemed on the verge of unraveling. Just when Jason thought he couldn't run any further, he rounded a corner and spotted Charlie near a familiar coffee shop, his body trembling and exhausted. He had stopped running, but he wasn't calm, not yet. Charlie's wide eyes met Jason's, full of fear and uncertainty. Jason stopped a few feet away, chest heaving with the effort of the chase. He knelt down, keeping his voice as steady as possible. "Charlie," he said softly, "it's okay. You're safe. You're okay." The dog didn't move at first, his fear holding him in place. But slowly, cautiously, he took a step forward, then another. Jason extended his hand, trembling, but determined. "Come here, boy." It took a few more moments, but Charlie finally, hesitantly, approached him. Jason gently clipped the leash back onto Charlie's collar, and they stood there for a moment, just breathing. Charlie's trembling body was slowly starting to relax, his eyes still full of uncertainty, but no longer the wild panic that had consumed him earlier. Jason stood, holding onto the leash, feeling the weight of the moment settle in his chest. They had made it through the test, but it had been a close call. The fear that had been triggered in Charlie was raw, and Jason knew that it would take time, more time than he'd realized, for Charlie to fully trust again. The challenge wasn't over. The road to healing wasn't linear. But in that moment, as Jason looked down at Charlie, he knew they had something stronger than fear between them. They had each other, and that was enough to face whatever came next. After the scare in the park, Jason was more determined than ever to give Charlie the stability and security he needed. The incident had shaken both of them, but it also solidified something Jason had suspected all along. Their bond wasn't just about him rescuing Charlie, it was about both of them saving each other. They were two wounded souls, learning to heal together. The next few weeks were a test of patience, as Jason navigated the delicate balance between allowing Charlie the time and space to process his fear and gradually pushing him out of his comfort zone. Jason knew it would take time for Charlie to trust again, and he didn't want to rush the process. Instead, they focused on small wins, shorter walks around the neighborhood, gradually increasing the number of other dogs they encountered. Charlie seemed to be getting better, inching forward with each experience, although the fear would flare up occasionally. One day, after a quiet morning walk, Jason returned to his apartment and received a call from a local animal rescue group he had been in touch with. They had heard about Charlie's progress through the posts Jason had shared online and wanted to know if he would be open to taking part in a special program they had launched, a buddy system for dogs like Charlie, who had faced significant trauma. The idea was to pair these dogs with another, calmer dog who could serve as a companion and role model, helping the fearful dog to integrate into the world more easily. Jason was intrigued by the idea, but also hesitant. He had seen how much progress Charlie had made on his own, and the thought of introducing another dog into their home brought a mix of excitement and anxiety. What if it upset Charlie? What if it set him back? After discussing it with the rescue organization, Jason agreed to meet a potential buddy dog, a calm and friendly Labrador named Max. The rescue had chosen Max specifically because of his gentle temperament and history of helping other anxious dogs. Jason and Charlie met Max at the rescue center, and the two dogs seemed to get along instantly. Max was laid back, content to sniff around and give Charlie plenty of space, but also patient and warm enough to gently nudge Charlie out of his shell. Over the next few days, Jason and Max's owner worked together to introduce the two dogs in short, controlled environments. It was clear that Max's presence was a calming influence on Charlie. The two dogs would walk side by side, their pace in sync, and Charlie, once so apprehensive, began to take more interest in the world around him. There were still moments of hesitation, but with Max by his side, Charlie seemed more willing to face his fears. Jason couldn't help but be amazed. Max, the Labrador, had become not only a companion for Charlie, but also a mirror for Jason. Watching how Max gently encouraged Charlie to engage with the world reminded Jason of the role he had played in Charlie's life from the very beginning, offering support, understanding, and patience. It was as if Charlie had now found a guide, someone to show him how to navigate the world with confidence. And Jason had found a new sense of purpose. He was no longer just Charlie's caretaker. He was part of a larger journey, one that involved learning from each other, healing together, and facing challenges side by side. The unlikely bond between Charlie and Max was a reminder that sometimes the most healing relationships aren't just between humans or between humans and animals. They can be found between animals too. Jason watched as Charlie trotted alongside Max, his tail wagging, and felt a deep sense of peace. It wasn't just that they had survived the hardships. They had come out of it stronger, more connected, and more resilient than ever before. It was a journey that Jason had never expected, but one he knew would stay with him for the rest of his life. Months passed, and Charlie's transformation continued to amaze everyone who followed his journey. What had started as a small act of compassion, adopting a dog who had been abandoned, had blossomed into something far bigger than Jason had ever anticipated. Together, Jason and Charlie had faced not just the scars of a past filled with neglect and fear, but had also built something beautiful, a relationship rooted in trust, patience, and love. And now, with the addition of Max, their family was more complete than ever. As Charlie and Max continued to grow closer, Jason found that the pair had a remarkable effect on each other. Max's calm nature helped Charlie remain grounded in unfamiliar situations, while Charlie's progress reminded Max of the resilience and bravery that even the most fearful animals could possess. It was clear to Jason that their bond wasn't just about the dogs. It was a story that touched everyone around them. Jason had never imagined that the simple act of rescuing a dog would turn into something so meaningful, but it had. With every post he shared online, people reached out to him, telling him how Charlie's journey had inspired them. Some had adopted dogs of their own, others had donated to animal shelters, and many had shared their own stories of recovery and second chances. Jason's inbox was filled with messages from people who had been moved by Charlie's transformation and who, like Jason, were now rethinking what it meant to give love and care to those who needed it most. It wasn't just the dog lovers who were impacted. Jason's story reached a wider audience, people who had never considered adopting a dog or who had been unaware of the plight of shelter animals. Some even began to volunteer their time, helping with rehabilitation efforts and spreading awareness about the importance of second chances for animals who had been abandoned or mistreated. Jason had unknowingly become an advocate for adoption and rescue, using his platform to amplify the message of hope for dogs like Charlie. One day, as Jason sat on the couch, Charlie and Max curled up beside him. He realized that their story had reached a turning point. It wasn't just about healing anymore. It was about giving back. He had been fortunate to have found Charlie when he did, but there were still so many dogs out there who needed a second chance, just like Charlie had. In a moment of clarity, Jason decided to do more. He began volunteering at local animal shelters, sharing his experiences with others who were interested in adopting rescue animals. He offered support to new pet owners, sharing the lessons he had learned over the past months about patience, understanding, and trust. He even partnered with the rescue organization that had introduced Max to Charlie, helping to fundraise and raise awareness for their programs. But the real change, Jason realized, was in the hearts of the people who had been touched by his story. Whether through adopting a dog, donating to shelters, or simply spreading the word about the importance of rescue animals, his small act of kindness had sparked a ripple effect. It had created a community of people who understood that sometimes the best way to heal was to offer a second chance to someone who needed it. As he looked at Charlie, who was now napping peacefully beside Max, Jason felt a deep sense of fulfillment. They had come so far together. From the dog who had once been too afraid to trust to the confident animal who now played with other dogs, ran freely in the park, and shared moments of joy with Jason and Max. The journey had been long and difficult, but it had also been incredibly rewarding. Jason knew that their story wasn't just one of healing. It was a legacy of love, compassion, and the belief that everyone, no matter their past, deserved a second chance. And in that moment, he couldn't help but feel grateful for the dog who had come into his life when he needed him most. A dog named Charlie who had changed everything.